On Fort Halcyon, respect was measured in chevrons. Rank decided who spoke, experience decided who mattered, and silence decided who survived. That's why no one noticed the woman pushing a mop bucket through the K9 compound at 0447 hours. No salute, no greeting, no names spoken aloud. Just another civilian contractor cleaning dog kennels on a base built for warriors. They didn't know that 3 days later, every one of them would stand at rigid attention, backs straight, chins lifted, hands snapping to their brows in perfect unison, saluting a legend whose shadow they had walked through without ever realizing it. And by then, the damage was already done. Fort Halcyon sat hidden behind forests and layered security checkpoints, its designation absent from most public maps. Officially, it was a joint training installation. Unofficially, it was where doctrine was tested before the rest of the military ever heard about it. The K9 Operations Wing was one of its crown jewels. Dogs trained for tracking, explosives detection, direct action raids, and trauma recovery, some of them veterans of more firefights than the soldiers who handled them. Second Lieutenant Daniel Mercer arrived before sunrise every morning. Not because he had to, because he was afraid not to. At 24, Daniel was young even by lieutenant standards. ROTC had taught him theory. Fort Halcyon was teaching him consequence. He walked with his spine straight, boots polished just enough to avoid scrutiny, cover worn correctly but not ostentatiously. He understood the unspoken rules. Don't draw attention. Don't challenge enlisted leaders unnecessarily. Learn before you speak. That morning, as always, his route took him past the kennels, and as always, she was already there. She worked without music, no earbuds, no phone, just the scrape of rubber boots on concrete, the rhythmic hiss of water, the metallic clink of kennel latches. Her coveralls were gray, sun-faded, stitched with a simple name tag. No rank, no title, no insignia. Her hair was pulled back tight, practical. Her movements were economical. No wasted steps, no hurried motions. Daniel noticed something else. The dogs watched her. Not nervously, not aggressively, attentively. Military working dogs were trained to read posture, tone, intent. They responded to clarity and confidence, and she had both. Daniel slowed his pace once, just enough to observe. She paused in front of a Belgian Malinois. Older, scars visible beneath short fur. The dog didn't bark, didn't pace. She crouched, met its eyes, and spoke softly. The dog exhaled. Daniel felt an unexpected chill. Staff Sergeant Kyle Brennan noticed her too, but for different reasons. Brennan was everything Fort Halcyon rewarded on the surface. Combat tours, chest full of ribbons, reputation for aggression under fire. He'd earned respect the hard way once. Now he coasted on it. Brennan oversaw kennel operations on paper, though he rarely handled the dogs himself anymore. Administration bored him. Authority didn't. He leaned against a fence that morning, coffee in hand, watching her hose down a run. "Hey," he called out. "Rivers, right?" She didn't respond. Brennan smirked. "Guess the dogs listen better than you," a corporal laughed. Another added, "Careful, Sarge, she might report us to the Labradors Union." The laughter echoed off the concrete walls. Daniel heard it from 20 yards away. His jaw tightened. The woman shut off the hose, methodical, and moved to the next kennel without so much as a glance. Brennan shrugged. "See? Doesn't even care." But something about the way she ignored him unsettled Daniel. It wasn't fear, it was dismissal. Daniel spent the rest of the morning buried in logistics reports, inventory discrepancies, handler rotation schedules, maintenance backlogs. But his mind kept drifting. He'd grown up military. His father had been enlisted. His mother, a nurse, who understood silence and sacrifice. Disrespect without cause bothered him. At 1100 hours, Daniel returned to the kennels to verify an equipment request. He found Brennan again, louder this time. "So what did you do before this?" Brennan asked the woman, leaning into her space. "Mess up at Starbucks? Or did the dogs outrank you too?" A ripple of amusement moved through the nearby soldiers. Daniel stopped walking. He knew the rule. Don't undermine NCO authority. But another rule pressed harder. Don't tolerate conduct unbecoming. "Staff Sergeant," Daniel said, voice steady but quiet. Brennan turned, surprised. "Yes, sir? That's enough." A beat. Brennan's expression shifted, calculated, tight. "Just joking around, Lieutenant." Daniel met his eyes. "Not appropriate." Silence stretched. Yes, sir, Brennan replied finally, but the edge in his voice promised memory. Daniel exhaled only after Brennan walked away. The woman didn't acknowledge him, didn't nod, didn't thank him. She simply continued cleaning. For some reason, that bothered him more than if she had. That afternoon, Daniel reviewed kennel files. One entry caught his attention. No further details. Ajax was the dog he'd seen her speak to. Daniel checked the notes. Trauma indicators, refusal to eat at times, startle responses during drills. Yet disciplinary reports were minimal. Someone was managing the dog well. The kennel woman? Daniel looked up as footsteps approached. She stood in the doorway. Lieutenant, she said calmly. Her voice was even, controlled, educated. Yes, Ajax's feeding schedule needs adjusting. Night feed only. He associates daylight meals with deployment prep. Daniel blinked. That's not in the file. No, she replied. It wouldn't be. A pause. Thank you for addressing the conduct earlier, she added, already turning away. Not many do. Before Daniel could respond, she was gone. He stared after her. For the first time since arriving at Fort Halcyon, Daniel felt like he was missing something important. That night, Fort Halcyon hummed with quiet readiness. Generators pulsed, lights burned low, men and women trained while the rest of the world slept. In the kennels, the woman finished her shift long after sunset. She stood alone for a moment, resting one hand on a steel gate. Ajax approached. She placed her forehead briefly against the bars. Still here, she murmured. So am I. Unseen by anyone else, she straightened her spine. The posture of a soldier. Fort Halcyon never truly slept. At 01:30 hours, floodlights cut pale cones across the training fields, illuminating dust, breath, and discipline. Night operations were where mistakes surfaced, where exhaustion stripped away professionalism and revealed character. Second Lieutenant Daniel Mercer stood at the edge of the K9 compound, clipboard tucked under his arm, watching handlers cycle through a late-night readiness drill. The dogs were sharp, the people less so. Voices carried sharper edges, commands overlapped, corrections came faster than explanations, and in the shadows near the far kennels, Rivers watched. She wasn't scheduled. She hadn't signed in at the duty desk, yet she stood there as if she belonged. Daniel approached cautiously. "Ma'am," he said, "you're working late." She didn't look at him right away. "Stress reveals habits," she replied. "Night reveals truth." Daniel nodded, unsure what else to say. Ahead of them, a handler lost patience when his dog hesitated at a simulated breach. "Move!" he snapped, jerking the leash. The dog flinched. Rivers inhaled slowly. Daniel felt it, something subtle, like pressure in the air. She stepped forward before he could stop her. "That's enough," Rivers said quietly. The handler froze, confused. "Ma'am, this is a controlled exercise. You're flooding him," she replied. "Your tone, your posture. He's reading you as unstable." The handler glanced toward Staff Sergeant Brennan, who stood nearby, arms crossed. Brennan scoffed. "Hey, kennel staff," he called. "You're out of your lane." Rivers turned. Her gaze settled on Brennan, not angry, not offended, assessing. "Your dogs mirror you," she said, "and right now they're reflecting poorly." A ripple of tension spread. Brennan stepped forward, jaw tight. "You don't give orders here." Rivers held his stare. "No," she said. "I evaluate." Silence followed. Daniel's pulse spiked. This was dangerous. Then Rivers stepped back, as if nothing had happened. "Continue," she said. The drill resumed, shakier than before. Brennan watched her walk away, his expression darkening. 2 hours later, the base alarms didn't sound, but something shifted. Vehicles rolled through Gate 3 without advance notice. Black sedans, no unit markings. Daniel was in the operations office when the call came. "All section leads report to command, now." When he arrived, the room was already tense. And at the head of the table, 2 generals Daniel had only seen in briefing slides. "Gentlemen," one of them said, "this is a readiness verification. No smiles, no notice," the other added. "Real conditions." Daniel's stomach tightened. The K9 wing was listed first. As teams scrambled, Brennan moved fast, too fast. He signed off on reports without checking them, waived maintenance delays, skipped behavioral notes. "Paper looks clean," he muttered. "That's what matters." Daniel watched, uneasy. "What about Ajax?" he asked. "His trauma protocols, handled." Brennan snapped. Dog's fine. Daniel hesitated. Sir, with respect, the documentation. Brennan leaned in. You're new, Lieutenant. Don't complicate this. Daniel fell silent. But the discomfort stayed. The inspection reached the kennels just before dawn. Floodlights flared. Questions came rapid fire. Handlers demonstrated drills. Dogs executed with precision until Ajax, a simulated explosion detonated. Too loud, too sudden. Ajax froze, then bolted. A handler shouted. Another grabbed the leash. Wrong move. Ajax panicked. Brennan barked orders. Chaos spread. Then, stand down. Rivers' voice cut through it all. She was already moving. Leash off, she said. Give him space. Brennan spun. Get her out of here. But the generals watched. Rivers knelt, posture open, voice low. She spoke to Ajax in a cadence Daniel had never heard. Measured, exact, layered with familiarity. Ajax slowed. Breathing steadied. He sat, perfectly. Silence gripped the compound. One of the generals leaned toward the base commander. Who is that woman? The commander's face went pale. He stepped forward and saluted. Sharp, respectful, immediate. Ma'am, he said. Didn't know you were on site. Rivers stood, returned the salute. Unscheduled, she replied. But necessary. Every soldier froze. Brennan stared, color draining from his face. The general nodded slowly. Dr. Rivers, he said, we appreciate your discretion. Rivers turned to the assembled personnel. You failed Ajax, she said calmly. Not because of resources, because of culture. She looked directly at Brennan. Discipline without empathy becomes cruelty. No one spoke. The inspection continued, but the outcome was already clear. Brennan was dismissed from the floor. Daniel was summoned privately. You spoke earlier, Rivers said. Why? Because it was wrong, Daniel replied. She studied him. Remember that, she said. You'll need it. Inspections didn't end with a salute. They ended with silence, the kind that settled into hallways long after footsteps faded, heavy with questions no one dared ask aloud. Fort Halcyon looked the same the morning after the incident. Flags raised at reveille, units running PT under pale skies, engines warming on the tarmac. But beneath the routine, something had shifted. Second Lieutenant Daniel Mercer felt it in the way conversations stopped when he entered a room, in the way senior NCOs avoided eye contact, in the way Staff Sergeant Brennan's name suddenly disappeared from duty rosters. Officially, Brennan was temporarily reassigned pending review. Unofficially, everyone knew. A line had been crossed and exposed. Daniel was ordered to report to Conference Room C at 0900 hours. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee and tension. 2 colonels, 1 civilian auditor, and, at the head of the table, Dr. Margaret Rivers, not in coveralls, in uniform. The sight struck Daniel harder than he expected. Colonel's eagle, rows of ribbons, some he recognized, some he didn't. A presence that filled the room without effort. Lieutenant Mercer, she said. Sit. He did. We're reviewing cultural compliance, she continued. Not checklists. Behavior. She slid a file across the table. Brennan's incidents documented, warnings ignored, complaints buried. Why wasn't this addressed earlier? One colonel asked. Silence. Then Daniel spoke. Because Staff Sergeant Brennan was considered untouchable, he said carefully. Combat record, reputation. Rivers nodded. And because silence is easier than conflict, she added. The civilian auditor looked up. Lieutenant, he said, are you aware of any retaliation? Daniel hesitated. Yes, he said, against junior handlers who reported concerns. Another note was made. Rivers met Daniel's eyes. This was the turning point. By noon, the base knew Daniel had testified. Not officially, but Fort Halcyon ran on rumor faster than orders. A senior sergeant cornered him near the motor pool. Careful, sir, the man said quietly. You don't make friends like this. Daniel nodded. I'm not here to make friends. That night, Daniel found his locker vandalized, not destroyed, just enough to send a message. He reported it. Nothing happened. Rivers noticed. She said nothing, yet. In a secure office beneath the operations wing, Rivers reviewed years of data. Patterns emerged. High-performing units with high burnout. Exceptional results masking ethical erosion. Dogs retired early. Handlers rotated fast, not because of war, because of leadership. She paused at one report, Ajax, handler, sergeant first class. Thomas Hale, Kaye Rivers closed her eyes briefly. She remembered Hale. Brilliant, gentle. Killed by an IED during a clearance op in Kandahar. Ajax had been there, so had she. No one else on this base knew that. Brennan was called in that evening. He stood rigid, jaw clenched. "This is a witch hunt," he said. "I delivered results." Rivers studied him. "So did many others," she replied. "Without leaving scars." "You think you understand pressure?" Brennan snapped. "You clean Kennels." Rivers didn't react. She stood, removed her cover, placed it on the table. "Colonel Margaret Rivers," she said evenly. "Former commander, Joint K-9 Task Group, retired." Brennan's breath caught. "I was in Kandahar when Hale died," she continued. "I watched Ajax drag him out of the blast radius. I watched that dog refuse food for 3 days after." Brennan's defiance wavered. "You forgot," Rivers said, "that discipline exists to protect the vulnerable, not to dominate them." Security entered. Brennan was escorted out. Later that night, Daniel found Rivers in the kennels. She was back in coveralls. "Why the disguise?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "People behave honestly when they think no one important is watching." Daniel nodded. "Ajax will be reassigned," she said. "To a recovery program. You'll oversee logistics." Daniel straightened. "Yes, ma'am." She paused. "You did well," she added. "But this isn't over." Pressure didn't announce itself at Fort Halcyon. It whispered. It whispered in delayed paperwork. In reassigned duties that felt accidental but weren't. In doors that used to open easily and now required reminders. Second Lieutenant Daniel Mercer felt it everywhere. His access badge still worked. His uniform was still clean. His rank was still respected, on paper. But conversations ended when he entered rooms. Handlers who once nodded now looked away. Someone had drawn a line, and Daniel was standing on the wrong side of it. The retaliation was subtle, designed to be deniable. Daniel was pulled from planning meetings. His logistics requests stalled without explanation. A routine evaluation came back with vague language, promising but lacks situational awareness. He read it twice, then a third time. The words weren't accusations, they were warnings. That night, he found Dr. Rivers standing alone near the kennels, hands clasped behind her back, watching Ajax sleep. "They're squeezing you," she said without turning. "Yes, ma'am." "Good," she replied. "That means the truth hurt." Daniel hesitated. "Is it worth it?" he asked quietly. Rivers turned to him then, her eyes held no softness. "It's only worth it if you don't flinch," she said. "Institutions don't change when people speak. They change when people endure." 48 hours later, the Internal Review Board convened. Not in a public hall, in a secure briefing room with no windows. Senior officers, legal advisors, civilian oversight, and one empty chair, Brennan's. The evidence was methodical. Incident reports, witness testimony, behavioral assessments. The pattern was undeniable, but patterns threatened reputations, and reputations fought back. He produced results, one colonel argued. Operational success matters. Rivers leaned forward. "So does sustainability," she replied. "You don't build excellence by burning people and animals alike." A general nodded slowly. "The question," he said, "is whether this is an anomaly or a culture." Silence followed. Then Daniel spoke. "Sir," he said, voice steady, "it's a culture, and we taught it." Every eye turned to him. No one interrupted. Outside the room, rumors moved faster than facts. Brennan's allies were restless. Some believed he'd been wronged. Others feared exposure. That night, an anonymous complaint was filed against Daniel. Accusations of insubordination, unprofessional conduct, questionable judgment. Rivers received the notice first. She summoned Daniel. "Someone wants you quiet," she said. "This is where many officers step back." Daniel swallowed. "I won't," he said. Rivers studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "Good," she said, "because tomorrow you'll stand." The base-wide assembly was announced at 600 hours, mandatory attendance, full uniform. Speculation buzzed through the ranks. Daniel stood in formation, heart pounding. The stage was simple, no banners, no ceremony. Dr. Rivers stepped forward, but not as a cleaner, not as an observer, as a colonel. She spoke without notes. Fort Halcyon exists to set the standard, she said, not to hide behind it. She detailed the findings, the failures, the silence, the cost. Then she paused. Discipline, she said, is not fear. It is trust. Her eyes scanned the formation. Those who confuse authority with dominance will not lead here. A command followed. Staff Sergeant Kyle Brennan is relieved of duty. Effective immediately. A collective inhale swept the formation. Rivers turned. "Lieutenant Mercer," she called. Daniel stepped forward. "Stand here." He did. She faced the formation. "This officer chose integrity when it was inconvenient," she said. "That is leadership." She saluted him. Sharp, formal. The base followed. Hundreds of hands snapped upward in unison. Daniel felt the weight of it. Not pride, responsibility. The morning after the assembly, Fort Halcyon felt different, not quieter, more deliberate. Orders were given more carefully, corrections were made without shouting, and for the first time in a long while, people looked at one another when they spoke. Second Lieutenant Daniel Mercer stood outside the K-9 compound just after sunrise, watching handlers move through their routines. There were no jokes that morning, no casual disrespect, just work, done correctly. Ajax lay in the shade near the far fence, calm, alert, finally at ease. Dr. Rivers approached, no entourage, no announcement, back in coveralls. Daniel turned instinctively. "Ma'am." "At ease," she said. "Today I'm just Margaret." She knelt beside Ajax, resting a hand against the kennel gate. "He's ready," she said, quietly. "For reassignment?" "For peace," she replied. Brennan was gone by noon. No ceremony, no goodbye, just a quiet transfer order and an empty office. Some called it harsh, others called it overdue. Rivers addressed the remaining leadership in closed session. "This wasn't about one man," she said. "It was about what you allowed to grow because it produced numbers." She let the words hang. "You don't measure excellence by output alone," she continued. "You measure it by what survives after pressure." Several officers nodded, a few looked down. Later that evening, Daniel found Rivers alone at the Kennels again, her last night on base. "I never thanked you," he said. She smiled faintly. "You did," she replied. "By not backing down." Daniel hesitated. "Why here?" he asked. "Why like this?" Rivers leaned against the fence. "Because power changes behavior," she said. "But anonymity reveals it." She looked out across the compound. "I wanted to know who this place really was, when no one thought it mattered." Daniel absorbed that. "You passed," she added. "We?" he asked. Rivers met his eyes. "You did." The next morning, Fort Halcyon assembled one last time. This one wasn't mandatory, and yet, attendance was full. Dr. Rivers stood at the front, dressed in uniform, sunlight catching the worn edges of her ribbons. She spoke briefly. "I didn't come here to punish," she said. "I came to remind." She gestured toward the kennels. "To remind you that leadership is what you do when no one important is watching." She turned toward Daniel. "Lieutenant Mercer." He stepped forward. "Effective immediately," she said. "You are assigned as Acting Oversight Officer for K-9 Operations, Logistics, and Welfare." A ripple moved through the formation. Rivers raised her hand. "Attention." Boots snapped together. "Salute." Every soldier raised their hand. This time, the salute wasn't for rank. It was for example. Dr. Rivers left Fort Halcyon the way she had arrived, quietly, no motorcade, no press. As her vehicle passed the kennels, she glanced one last time at Ajax. The dog stood, watched, then lay back down, at peace. Daniel stood at attention until the vehicle disappeared beyond the gate. Months later, Fort Halcyon's K-9 program became the model for humane, effective integration across multiple commands. Ajax was placed with a recovery handler and later adopted by a veteran. Daniel was promoted, slowly, deliberately. He never forgot the lesson, and neither did the base. They laughed at the woman who cleaned dog kennels because they thought importance wore rank. They were wrong. True authority doesn't announce itself. True discipline doesn't need cruelty, and true leadership is revealed not by who obeys you, but by who you protect when no one is watching. Some legends don't arrive to be seen, they arrive to see you.